It begins, strangely, with silence. A quiet monastery sits on a hill overlooking a river, somewhere in medieval France. The bells haven't rung yet. The brothers haven't begun their morning chants. But in the garden, long before dawn, one figure is already working. His name is Brother Matthias. He kneels in the cold earth with a tiny knife, trimming the seed heads from plants that look ordinary. Beans, lettuce, cabbage. But what he's doing isn't ordinary at all. He's saving seeds, protecting the future in handfuls no larger than dust. And for centuries, men and women like him kept Europe's biodiversity alive, while the world collapsed around them. This is their story. To understand what made monks so important, we have to step back in time, to a world on the edge of forgetting. After Rome fell, Europe fractured. Trade routes vanished. Knowledge splintered. Fields once fed by empire suddenly stood empty, their seeds uncollected. And with each winter, varieties were lost. Most people never traveled beyond their village. If a crop failed, you didn't just go hungry, you lost its lineage forever. Seeds were memory. Lose them once, and 1,000 meals disappeared. But monasteries were different. They were islands of learning, libraries of parchment and prayer. And in their walled gardens, their cloisters, monks cultivated more than faith. They grew future harvests. Imagine one of these gardens. Paths laid out like crosses, rows of herbs for healing, beets, parsnips, beans climbing trellises, and tucked away in a corner, tiny plots filled with rare plants brought from distant lands. If a traveler arrived with an unfamiliar seed, the monks planted it, studied it, wrote about its taste, its yield, its temperament, and then, crucially, they saved its seeds, passing it down through generations. In a world without refrigerators, freezers, or gene banks, this was cutting-edge preservation. It was agriculture. As religion, the rules were strict. Seeds had to be taken from the best plants, the ones that grew strongest, resisted disease, tasted sweetest. Monks recorded everything: rainfall, frost, flavor, soil. Over decades, plants changed, they adapted, they improved. Peas became plumper, wheat grew taller, greens became more tender. This wasn't random. It was selective breeding, centuries before the word existed. It's quietly astonishing. Monasteries anticipated modern genetics by almost a millennium, but every good story has a threat. And this one arrives like a storm. War. When armies marched, they burned fields, villagers fled, seeds were left behind, trampled into mud. Famines followed like shadows. A lost seed didn't just mean hunger that year, it meant hunger forever, except for the cloisters. Protected by stone walls and religious law, monks became the guardians of calories. If a crop vanished from the countryside, farmers knew where to beg for a handful of seeds, a handful that could restart a region's future. One seed can become thousands. Monks understood this better than anyone. Things changed again in the 14th century. The Black Death arrived. Half of Europe died. Fields were abandoned. Harvests rotted where they grew. Varieties that had been cultivated for generations vanished in a single, terrible year. But in monasteries, gardens kept growing. Even as monks fell sick, the survivors tended their plants, saving seeds carefully between trembling fingers. When the plague retreated, refugees returned to find desolate fields, and walked to the monastery door. Brother Matthias, if he survived, would have poured seeds into cupped hands, whispering prayers not for faith, but for germination. Those tiny seeds were resurrection. Centuries later, another disaster struck: fire. London's Inferno in 1666 devoured thousands of manuscripts, including seed lists and garden notes. It was more than paper that burned, it was agricultural memory. Yet again, monasteries offered shelter. Copies of herbals, lists of medicinal plants, growing advice preserved behind stone. Monasteries weren't just keeping seeds alive, they were keeping knowledge alive. Now, here's where the story tilts unexpectedly. In 1536, Henry VIII dissolved England's monasteries. Libraries were looted, gardens were ripped apart, seeds were scattered or lost completely. Within a generation, some varieties had vanished forever. But seeds are patient. Some monks fled, carrying tiny pouches sewn into their sleeves, hidden beneath layers of wool. Inside, the last survivors of medieval vegetables, those seeds found refuge in continental cloisters. France, Belgium, the Alps, and quietly continued. A handful of plants, disguised as devotion. It feels like espionage, except the weapon is dinner. Time passed. Empires rose and fell. Industrialization arrived. We forgot where our food came from. We forgot how fragile diversity was. Millions planted the same standardized crops, identical wheat, identical barley, identical lettuce, convenient, uniform, efficient, until disease struck. In 1845, potato blight swept Europe. Ireland starved. 1 million deaths. Why? Because everyone planted the same potato. Lack of diversity is vulnerability. And guess who offered the cure? Monastic seed archives, collections of ancient tubers that resisted the fungus. Genetic variation saved lives. Brother Matthias would have nodded quietly, as if he'd been expecting this. Fast forward to today. Modern scientists talk of seed resilience, heirloom genetics, biodiversity collapse. All buzzwords describing something monks already understood. Never put all your meals in one basket. They never trusted a single variety. They grew dozens different shapes, colors, harvest times. If one failed, another succeeded. It wasn't superstition. It was strategy. This is where the emotional heartbeat of the story lies. Seeds are time capsules. They carry the decisions of every gardener who ever saved them. A seed from 1320 might hold a flavor lost in 1850. A seed from 900 might resist a fungus discovered in 2005. Every generation adds something to the code. When monks passed down seeds, they passed down the work of hands long buried. It's a chain of care spanning 1,000 years. A legacy you can eat. But now, ironically, the danger has returned. According to the UN, we've lost 75% of global crop diversity in the last 120 years. 3 companies control over half of the world's commercial seed market. When life depends on profit, diversity becomes inconvenience. Which means that you, planting seeds in your allotment, are doing something ancient. You're part of the same story as Brother Matthias. The act of saving a seed is rebellion. It protects freedom, the freedom to eat something that isn't identical to every other plate. That's why heritage vegetables taste different. They taste like memory. So, what happened to Brother Matthias's garden? We don't know his real name. We don't know his face. But we see his fingerprints everywhere. In purple-skinned beans from Italy. In medieval cabbages preserved in northern France. In ancient peas still grown in Kentish monasteries. Every heirloom seed is a whisper of his work. The monastery walls may have crumbled, but their gardens survived, scattered into pockets around Europe. Tucked into farms, passed down quietly like family secrets. That's why modern chefs seek them. Why gardeners treasure them. Why scientists archive them in vaults beneath the Arctic. Because one bad harvest can change the world. The next time you hold a seed, a tiny, unremarkable thing, Pause. That speck is older than empires, tougher than famine, more hopeful than any prayer. It holds information carved by centuries of winters. It contains flavor sculpted by forgotten hands. You are not just planting food. You are continuing the work of monks bending over garden beds at dawn, saving the future one handful at a time. Thank you for watching Ancient Ways. If stories like this remind you that history grows beneath our feet, subscribe. Next time, we'll dig up a vegetable that once shaped the power of kingdoms and nearly vanished forever.